Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Okay, so basically till last class, what we were discussing, we discussed the solution for the steady state response of the harmonic excitation of a single degree of freedom system. Okay, so basically we solved this equation that we have here. Okay, and we obtained the solution, and we said that we would be focusing on steady state solution after the transient part dies out due to damping in the system. Okay, and then last class we saw to define the dynamic effect or to understand the dynamic effect of a excitation on a system, we define different kind of response modification factors. Okay, so we defined and discussed displacement modification or deformation modification factor, which we said that we are going to write it as this quantity here. Okay, at the same time we said that depending upon what is the application, okay, deformation response factor might not be good enough, and you might want to know what is the effect on the acceleration of the system and as well as velocity. And we discuss some examples like, for example, passenger safety and comfort inside a vehicle. It's better correlated to the acceleration in the vehicle rather than the displacement in the shock absorption system. But if you have to design the shock absorption system, then it's the displacement that you need to worry about. Okay, so that's why we studied, in addition to displacement response factor, we also studied velocity response factor. Okay, which was nothing but the same factor that we have here times RD. And then we also derived the expression for acceleration response factor, which was again the frequency ratio is square times RD. Okay, so in today's class, what we would be discussing, last class we plotted the variation of these three. Okay, and the variation, we saw that it helps us to, in qualitative analysis of the depending upon the ratio of the applied frequency to the natural frequency of the system. Okay, it helps in the qualitative assessment on how the system would behave. Okay, so we saw that, let us say this is the response modification factor, could be RD, could be RV or RF, and the horizontal, let us say it is, okay, frequency ratio. We saw that the displacement response factor, it starts with value of 1. Okay, and let us say system has some damping. Okay, so some finite value of damping, it's not zero damping. So it will start somewhere here. Okay, and then it will again go like this. All right, so we saw that it is displacement amplification factor is 1 for a very small value of omega by omega n. Now what does a very small value of omega by omega n means? It means that it's a slowly varying force. We are applying the load very slowly. Okay, or maybe I should draw it like this, with omega being very small. This is not omega, this is t. Okay, omega would be inverse of this. Let me write it 2 pi by omega here. Okay, so here it's 1, and as you increase the value, the RD actually goes to 0. So you don't actually get a lot of deformation if you have a very flexible system and you are applying a very high frequency load. So what I'm saying, that in the second case, if you have a very high frequency load and a very flexible system, okay, so this is slowly varying force, this is rapidly varying force. RD is equal to, okay, RD is equal to 1 here, this is 0. And considering the expression for RV and RA, we also try to plot that on the same graph. And we saw that because now it is being multiplied by omega n. It starts with a value of 0. Okay. It peaks around the value of omega n, and then it again goes to 0 at very large values. Okay. Similarly, so RV is 0, 0, and RA is equal to, let us see what happens. It starts with a value of 0. Okay, when omega n is equal to 0. However, for very large value of omega n, it actually converges to 1. Or maybe this, let me redraw it again. And this is velocity here. And the acceleration would look like something like this, which does not actually go to 0 at a very large value of omega n. It goes to actually 1, which means that a very rapidly varying force, if it is being applied, the acceleration would be, the amplification would be equal to 1. And you can imagine if you are applying a load very slowly, there won't be any acceleration. So it is equal to 0 here. Okay. So these are the three extreme cases, of course. Okay. One more thing that we wanted and what we did for actually, let me just copy it here. That at what value of omega n, I actually get the maximum value of the response. So resonance like condition. Okay. So what I've drawn here, I've actually plotted it, the variation of all three factors, okay, for different values of frequency ratio, and the plotted is here. The damping used for this one was 0.02. Now, if you look at carefully here, the resonance is actually not achieved at the same value of omega n. Okay, so if you look at displacement, it is the peak value is actually at value of omega n, which is slightly lower than the 1. And if you consider acceleration, okay, it is at slightly higher value of omega n than 1. Okay. However, velocity, if you look at it, it is at omega n. So the question comes that how do we determine, okay, so what we need to find out the resonant frequencies. Okay. You need to find out the resonant frequencies. Okay. And it would be different for all three: displacement response modification factor, velocity response modification factor, and acceleration response modification factor. And how do you get a maximum of any function? You just differentiate with respect to the variable and you set it equal to 0. Okay, which in this case, RD, RV, and RA is nothing but, let us say this variable is R equal to omega n. So that RD I can write as 1 minus R square and 2 zeta R square. Okay, so if you do this and equate it to 0, it would give you the value of R, okay, for which this expression is maximum. Okay, and so you can do that calculation. It's not very difficult. Okay, you guys already know how to differentiate and equate it to 0. Okay, and we can do the same thing for all three factors. So I can write RV as a function of small r and RA as a function of small r, and then again differentiate it and equate it to 0. Okay. When we do that, what we observe, we get the value of R, and what we observe that the forcing frequency for which, okay, it is the response is maximum. Let us first consider displacement RD. It is actually omega equal to omega n times 1 minus 2 zeta square. Okay. And the velocity modification factor is for omega equal to omega n, and sorry, third one would be the acceleration modification factor. Okay. And for which omega is omega n divided by 1 minus 2 zeta square. Okay. Now, if you look at it, the value of omega at which, or the forcing frequency at which resonance happens for the displacement is slightly smaller than omega n, as I previously discussed. And for acceleration, it is slightly higher than omega n. Okay. And then what you could do, you could substitute these values in the original expression to get the maximum value of the modification factors. Now, if you substitute these expressions back to this, what you would get, the maximum value of the RD max would be 1 by 2 zeta. Okay. RV max would be 1 by 2 zeta, and RA max would be same as displacement. Okay. Remember, these are factors, dimensionless factors. Okay. So these are the three maximum values for the respective modification factors. Okay. And I mean, for all values, as we discussed, like, typical value of zeta, let us say smaller than 0.1 or 0.2. Okay. If you look at it, they would approximately be same. Okay. So, and even if you look at in the graph, which has been drawn for 20% damping, 20% damping is like, huge damping, inherent damping for any type of a structure. Okay. Even for that, you can see, although they are little bit different. Okay. But not, let us say, maybe more than 10%. Okay. So for realistic value of, let us say, zeta equal to zeta is smaller than 0.1 or 10%, you would see that all the forcing frequencies are actually equal to omega n, and the response modifications factors are approximately equal to 1 by 2 zeta, because in here this term will drop out and this term will drop out. All right. So there are many applications of finding out the frequencies, as you would understand. Okay. The resonant frequencies for different kind of system. It helps you in design the system for maximum amplification. Okay. That what would be the maximum amplification of the system with a specified value of damping, and then you can design the system according to that. Okay. Now, there is a specific property of these modification factors are which we are going to utilize, okay, to obtain the experimental value of damping in the system. Remember, we discussed that damping is very difficult to model numerically. That's why we approximate it using viscous damping mechanism. And we say that it is CD or C times the velocity. Okay. However, to determine the value of that itself is a big challenge. Okay. Let us say for a structure, there is no established method through which I can find out, okay, what should be the value of CD, or specifically what should be the value of the damping, which is zeta, which is equal to C by C critical. Okay. So we utilize the properties of the dynamic system, okay, to obtain the value of zeta. We saw that we can do that, obtain the value of zeta using free vibration, right? We had a free vibration here where we applied initial condition and we let it vibrate. Okay. We did it using something called logarithmic decrement method. Okay. And we said that my zeta would not be nothing but 1 by 2 pi j ln ui plus j. So if I have j, if I'm taking the ratio of the amplitudes separated through j number of cycles, then I can use this expression to get the value of damping. Okay. Now let us see if I can do the same thing using forced vibration. So we did that using free vibration. Okay. Let us see if we can obtain damping using forced vibration. So there is a specific property of this function RD which allows us to obtain the value of damping. Okay, let us see how do we do that. Now, before going into that, first, can you imagine if I have to obtain experimentally the curve RD, which would look like something like this? Okay, how would I do that? Can you imagine experimentally? Can I say, let us say this is value of R, and as you know, the horizontal axis is omega by omega n. Now, I can have base excitation. Okay, so there are actually instruments in the lab which can apply harmonic excitation to a structure or a model. Okay, with let us say frequency omega, and this structure has frequency omega n. Now, what do we do experimentally? We provide this harmonic excitation. Okay, so omega by omega n would be known, and then we measure here either u naught, okay, or we measure, let us say, u double naught, acceleration. Okay, acceleration can be measured using accelerometer. The displacement can be measured using linear transducer like string potentiometer or things like that. Okay, so what do? We measure subject to this excitation, we measure the maximum value of displacement, and we could measure acceleration as well. Okay, then what do we do? For that particular value, we plot one data point here. Okay, then we increase frequency omega. Okay, so that it becomes something like this, and I get another omega by omega n which is being applied to the structure. Again, I would get another peak value of the response, right? So similarly, we draw it over a range of frequency ratio, and then we experimentally obtain this curve. Okay, so the curve is available to us, all right, from the experiments. Now the question becomes, how can you utilize this curve, okay, to obtain the damping ratio? Okay, so we are going to use a specific property of this response modification factor. Okay, let us see what do we do. Okay, so let me, it starts from, let us say this is the value of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and it goes something like this here. All right, so this curve I can obtain from experiments. Let us say the value of RD at this point is RD max. Okay, now once you have this curve, what do? You draw a horizontal line on this curve. Okay, so let us say you draw a horizontal line here, which is at value of RD equal to this maximum value divided by root 2. Okay, you obtain that. So you draw a horizontal line at this RD on this curve, okay, which is at this value. So let us say RD max was like 10. You draw a horizontal line at y equal to 10 by root 2. Now if you do that, it would it would intersect the curve at two different points. Okay, so at these 2 points it is going to intersect. Let us say that, okay, let us say that this is, first one is the frequency omega 1, or let us call it omega A, and the second one call it omega B. Now this is plotted divided by omega n, so I'll keep in the denominator omega n, and the peak would be, of course, as you know, would be closer to omega n. Okay, not exactly, okay, but for small values of damping it would be closer to omega n. All right, so the mathematical expression for this, what I am just doing here is, if I had RD at any frequency ratio, okay, so value of RD is nothing but this, okay, and I'm saying that it is RD max divided by root 2. So it is 1 by root 2 times, what is RD max? RD max is nothing, we have just derived here. Okay. This is, where it go? This is my RD max. Okay. So I'm going to write it here. Okay. So I'm intersecting the curve at this ordinate and equating it to value of RD so that I can find out these two frequencies that the curve is being intersected at. Okay, so what you would have here, this is a square here. So you would have a quadratic expression here. Okay, let me say my omega by omega n is equal to R. Okay, so that I can write it here as 1 minus R square plus 2 zeta R. Basically, this is the whole square. Okay, and this is equal to 1 by 2 root 2 zeta 1 minus. Okay, this is the expression for you have. This is a quadratic expression in R, and it would give you two values of omega by omega n, which would correspond to two roots of the system, the expression. Okay, and basically corresponds to the value of frequency, forcing frequency omega A and omega B. Okay, so this equation can be easily solved. Okay, let us solve this and see what do we get. Okay, so if I rearrange the terms, okay, I will have R4 and then I will have 2 zeta square minus 1 times R square plus 1, and if I bring this term to the right hand side it would be, okay, 8. So I'm taking the square of left hand side and right hand side both. Okay, 8 zeta square minus zeta square, and this is equal to 0. So this is a quadratic equation in R square, not R. This is a fourth order different equation. Okay, however, this is a quadratic equation in R square. Okay, so my R square is actually minus this quantity that I have here. Okay, plus minus. If I take B square minus 4AC, that would give me 4 times, and then there would be minus 4AC here. Okay, which is 1 minus 8 zeta square 1 minus zeta square and divided by 2A, so 2 times 1. So I can further simplify this as 1 minus 2 zeta square, 2 I will cancel off, and then I will take 4 outside. Okay, and then I'll expand this term so that I can get 1 minus 4 zeta square plus 4 zeta 4, and here I will have minus 1 plus 8 zeta square 1 minus zeta square. Okay, now this 1 will cancel off, and then I'll take 4 zeta square outside so that I get 2 zeta times, okay, you will have 1 minus, and it would be 2 zeta square. Okay, now for small values of damping, okay, for small values, actually it is not just zeta square. Okay, so for a small value of damping, what would happen? This zeta square term would be very small, and it can be neglected with respect to the number 1. So if I neglect the zeta square terms, what I will get here as 1 plus minus 2 zeta. Okay, and if you take the root of this, what you will get 1 plus minus 2 zeta. Okay, now you know that as per power expansion, if x is very small, which I'm assuming for small damping, this can be approximately written as 1 plus nx. Okay, so this can be approximately written as 1 plus minus half, which is the power of this expression here, times 2 zeta. Okay. So this is r is equal to 1 plus minus zeta. So I have two roots for r. Let us say the first root I write it as r1 equal to omega by omega n. Let me say this is a smaller value, and then r2 omega b by omega n, and this is 1 plus zeta. Okay, so I've got the two roots, and if I take omega b minus omega a, okay, by omega n, this I get as 2 zeta. Okay, so once I have this curve here, I intersect it at RD max divided by root 2. Okay, it is going to intersect the curve at two frequencies here, and these frequencies can be read from the plot that you have obtained experimentally. So omega A and omega B is known again experimentally. From quadratic equation, we saw that this is nothing but 2 zeta, right? Omega b by omega n minus omega a by omega n is actually 2 zeta we have just obtained. Okay, so all those values are known experimentally. So zeta I can obtain as omega b minus omega a divided by 2 omega n. Okay, and omega n can also be read from the graph itself, which is the value at which the peak is obtained. Or many times what is also done, these curves, you know that they are symmetrical about the point of maxima. So omega n can also be written as omega a plus omega b divided by 2. Okay, so that this one gives you omega b minus omega a divided by omega b plus omega a. Okay, so zeta can be obtained using these frequencies. Okay, so let me reiterate the procedure. Experimentally, you are going to obtain, okay, you are going to send these waves to a structure at certain frequency omega. Okay, omega n is the frequency of the structure, and you are going to plot for different frequencies omega by omega n what is the maximum response u naught or acceleration response, and then you are going to plot this curve. Okay, once you plot that curve, okay, you are going to see what is the value of RD max. You are going to divide it a horizontal line which is at RD max by root 2. It is going to cut this curve at two different frequencies omega a and omega b. Okay, and utilizing that you would be able to get damping in the system as, okay, this is called half power bandwidth. Okay, why this is called half power bandwidth? Because you are dividing it by 2 to the power half. Okay, and the bandwidth that you are getting is 2 zeta, using which you can calculate the value of damping. Okay, so now we have seen if it's a free vibration, I can utilize to obtain the damping using logarithmic decrement method. Okay, so free vibration, okay, I can utilize that to obtain, okay, the damping using logarithmic decrement method. Or for forced vibration, specifically harmonic excitation, so harmonic forced vibration, I can utilize to obtain damping using, okay, I can obtain to using half power bandwidth method. Okay, and these are actually very useful. These are utilized all the time in the labs, okay, to obtain the damping in the system, because damping is something that is not very easy to obtain. Okay, so we usually have to do experiments like this to obtain the damping in the system. Okay, any doubt up to this point?
Sir, could you explain omega n is equal to W A plus W, omega A plus omega B by 2?
Okay.
Like, is it symmetrical graph?
Most of the time it is. Okay. Sometimes it might not be symmetrical. Okay.
Yes.
In that case, you directly look at the peak and then you see what is the value of omega n. Okay. And remember, all these approximations are for a small value of damping.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for a small value of damping, it typically is. I mean, I'll just show you the plot that I had obtained. If you look at this, most of the times you will see, okay, let us say this is 2.5. Okay. And remember, this 2.5 is for a very high value of damping, isn't it? This is 20%. If you
Yeah.
had used, let us say 5%, it would have been like, much higher. And at those peaks, usually around that, you will see that these are symmetrical. Okay. But that approximation might not be good if you consider a very high value of damping. Then the symmetries actually start to, like, you lose the symmetry as you increase the value of damping. But in any case, if the damping is around 20% or more than that, then we don't utilize this method to obtain it. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, there was another question. Anyone?
Excuse me, sir, Dhanushi here.
Yeah.
Sir, I have one question. Like to calculate this, first we calculate RD max and
Yes.
then we are dividing it by root 2.
Correct.
So why root 2? Like it's what's
Okay.
the significance?
What is the significance of root 2? What
Yes.
happens? Remember, when you utilize here the root 2 value, you get quadratic. So people have tried different things, but they saw that, there is no physics behind it as such. So don't get confused that there is like, some methodological physics behind it. You just had this expression and people just observe that if you draw horizontal line at root 2, they get a quadratic expression which can be simplified in this form. Okay. Which can be simplified in this form so that you can get zeta, okay, as simply in terms of this frequency. If that factor would not have been root 2, what you would see here, let us say it is something 4 instead of root 2, let us say it is 2. If it is 2, what would happen inside? You would have this 4 2 zeta square terms, okay, and then here it would be 4 1 minus this factor here now would be, remember, 2 times 2 zeta. Okay, so it would be what? Square of this quantity, which would be 16, right? So
Yes.
instead of 8, it would be 16. Okay. Okay. And when you simplify this, what do you think would you get? You will get 1 minus 4 zeta square plus 4 zeta 4. Okay, I'm taking 4 outside, okay, outside the root. And then here it would be minus 1 plus 16 zeta square, okay, and it would be again minus 16 zeta 4, okay. So this you can get cancelled off, and what you would be remaining with basically 12, okay, 12 times zeta square minus 12 zeta 4, okay. So again you can, what you will be left with under root is actually this quantity here, okay.
Yes.
Now in this case I was directly getting as this quantity 2 zeta, okay. In this case I won't get 2 zeta, there would be some factor, let us call it root 12, okay.
Yes.
So I would basically get as 1 plus minus root 12 zeta, okay. So when I do this, what do you think I will get? When I do that, I will get 1 R1 and R2 equal to 1 plus minus half of root 12 times zeta.
Zeta. Yes.
Okay, so in this case, the expression that I will get would be not equal to simply omega b minus omega by 2n, but there would be another factor here. Okay.
Yes.
So you can keep using different factor. The most simplified form that you will get, which is of this form, is actually for a value of zeta or value of factor which is multiplied by root 2. Okay. So here you
Okay.
won't get root 2, you would get another factor. So the question is that why root 2? I mean, still I can utilize this equation and I can still get the value of zeta. Well, it won't be here like 1, it would be some other factor. Let us call it root 2 by 12. So this factor here would now be root 2 by 12.
12.
Root 12. What happens now? If you start going downwards here, okay, if you start going, as I said, the symmetry is actually lost. Okay, and these portions, when you see in the experiments, you do not always obtain this branch here. So in the experiment, what you would see, okay, you cannot apply very slow frequency during the experiment. Okay, you have to have a certain value of frequency. So usually you only get the top curve here. Okay, you only get the top part of the curve here in the experiments, because to obtain the experiments around this region, you have to apply the frequency, okay, at a very small value. Okay, and it is very difficult in the experiments to apply frequency at very small values. Okay, so this part you usually don't obtain. You usually obtain correctly the top part of it. Okay, and for the top part of it, root 2 is a good number to find out the damping value, not any other value. Okay, while you theoretically you may utilize any other value, still the root 2 is found to be a good value because it is in the vicinity of the peak of this one. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Any other question on this?
So can you once again please explain that half power bandwidth, why it is called like half power bandwidth?
Because it is divided by root 2. RD max is divided by root 2.
Okay.
Root 2 is called half power. Okay. And bandwidth is basically what you get this value. So if you divide it here, it will cut the curve at 2 frequency, and this is called 2 zeta here. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Thank
that
you,
is
sir.
Yeah. Just before moving to next topic, let me quickly remember that till now we have considered the equation subject to sinusoidal excitation, right? Not this. So the equation of motion we had considered is actually this, subject to sinusoidal excitation. Okay, but it might happen that the excitation is not sinusoidal, okay, but as a cosine function. So instead of this, I might have this. Question is, does it change anything in the system in terms of peak response or anything? Okay, the answer is not. Right? Why would it change? Both P naught cos sine omega t or P naught sine omega t, these are excitations with the same amplitude. Okay, this is sine omega t. Only thing is that P naught sine omega t starts at 0, P naught cos omega t starts at 1. Okay, and then it goes, the peak value, it goes something like this here. So only thing is that you will have a phase shift of 90 degree, right? So P naught sine omega t and P naught cos omega t are same function, except one, they are separated by a phase difference of phi. Now in terms of dynamic response or in terms of steady state response, does it matter if something is shifted, loading is shifted by phi, let us say 90 degree? No, it does not actually matter. In the steady state is a state which is achieved after the transient phase is damped out and after sufficient amount of time. Okay, so the peak response is not going to change if you shift the loading function just by a little bit of time. Okay, so in terms of response, it does not actually matter. In fact, you can solve this. Okay, you can apply the particular solution, you can apply the complementary solution, and the value of response ut that you would get would be again of the same form. It would be u naught cos omega t minus phi, where u naught is rd times ust naught. Okay, so only thing is that response, the steady state response would also be shifted by the same 90 degree, but the peak response u naught would be same whether it is sine excitation function or cos excitation function with the same amplitude. Okay, and rd is also same here, rv would also be same, and ra would also be same. So like we have done previously, you can again solve this expression and you can obtain the value of ut Only thing is that now it would be, instead of sine, it would be cos omega t minus phi, but u naught would be same. So the peak displacement, dynamic displacement would be same. RD, again, the same expression you will get. Okay. And other things also, like acceleration RA and RV would also be the same. Okay. And why does it happen? I mean, mathematically you can do it, but physically you can also understand these two functions are only shifted by phase. So there is only difference of phase. Magnitude is same, the peak value is same for the excitation forcing function. Okay, so it does not actually matter in terms of peak response or anything. All right. Okay. So once you understood, let us see some applications of viscously damped system. Okay. And we said that we discussed half power bandwidth, right? In which we said that if I have to apply, or if I have to find out the damping of a structure, like, a structural model in a laboratory, okay, and the frequency, then I'm going to apply frequencies at different frequencies, okay, to this structural model in the laboratory to obtain the response. Now, let us imagine I have to use this, okay, half power bandwidth method for a very large structure. Let us say it's an existing building, not a structural model in the laboratory, but let us say it's in the building. Okay, let us say it's a 4-story building. I mean, I cannot take all the experimental system, the testing systems, okay, and start applying load to a building, right? Because it's not possible, okay, for a large structure. Plus, it is not possible to apply such kind of loads. So the question becomes, if I have to find out the modal property of a structure, okay, and the dynamic properties of any large structure that cannot be tested in a lab, and most of the structure are like that, I mean, they cannot be tested, then how do I, if I need to get their modal frequencies and modal properties, okay, how do I get that? Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, in India we have a lot of dams, and these dams are quite old, and there are a lot of issues with dam, that whether they are safe or not. And there have been a lot of, I mean, if you read news, okay, and if you are aware of what's going on, there are a lot of old dams in India, and there are a lot of scrutiny of those old dams. Okay, and especially because people don't know whether they are safe under the earthquake or not, because the only way they could fail, I mean, apart from the aging, which they can, if you maintain properly, you can still save these old dams. However, during an earthquake, okay, these dams might get damaged. Now, what determines the structure behavior during a dynamic load like an earthquake? Two properties mostly: the time period or the frequency of the structure, and the second is the damping in the structure. Okay, so these dams actually have led to a lot of litigation, lot of court cases, lot of friction between different states in India. You might be aware of that if you follow the news. And it becomes imperative that a structural engineer go and assess where this dam is actually safe or not. Okay, and whether these dams would be safe or not under any large earthquake. So the question comes, how do I do that? I mean, you don't have design drawings available or the material property available for a structure that is 50 years old or 40 years old, right? Plus, you also don't know that over the time how the materials have degraded, right? So the properties would also have changed. So if you try to estimate numerically using the properties, the period of the dams, then, or any other structure for a matter of sake, okay, then it is not going to be correct. Okay, so what you would like to do actually for a large structure, you would like to obtain experimentally these properties. What are the properties? The frequencies and the damping. Okay, so then question becomes, I cannot apply the half power bandwidth because I cannot take an actuator or the load applying machine there and start shaking the basically the dam itself. Not possible. Okay, So do I have any other method through which I can generate vibration in the structure? Okay, I can generate harmonic vibration in the structure, so that again it gives me a curve like this, which peaks at certain value, which would correspond to the resonant frequency or the natural frequency of the structure. Okay, and then I can utilize the half power bandwidth method again to get the damping as well. Okay, and once you understand that what is your requirement and what is the limitation of half power bandwidth method in its current form, okay, we utilize something called vibration generator. Okay, we utilize something called vibration generator. Okay, these vibration generators can be attached to a structure. Okay, and then the loads can be applied, okay, through these vibration generator. Okay, now many of you guys would have a washing machine in your homes, right? What happens, especially with the old washing machine, when it starts rotating? Have you guys noticed some shaking in the washing machine? And sometimes that shaking is quite loud, isn't it? So if you have a washing machine, let us say it's a front loading washing machine, so that it is rotating like this, and it is okay. So it is rotating, let us say, circular motion, and it is kept on this one. Now what you will have actually, the clothes inside it and the water inside it. As it rotates, you might have noticed that there is a lot of shaking in this washing machine. And to overcome that, either you get a heavy washing machine for which the support itself is very heavy, or you fixed it at the base, or you keep it on a tray, but tray actually does not work that good. Okay, so this is a very simple example of a washing machine. So the question comes, why does this washing machine vibrates? Okay, because if there is a circular load, okay, why should it vibrate? It vibrates because your clothes are not distributed uniformly inside. Okay, so somewhere you might have, okay, more clothes and somewhere left, and that leads to basically imbalanced load, and that is the principle behind a vibration generator. So let us see what a vibration generator is. A vibration generator in its simplest form is basically unbalanced load rotating about a certain point. Okay, one of the example, and I'm not saying this is the only example of a vibration generator. Any unbalanced load can produce force. Okay, how? Let us see. Let us say I have two pendulum like structure which are fixed, and this is just a simplified representation of the vibration generator. Okay, and these are fixed like this. You have a sleeve on the top, you would have the first pendulum, and then you have a washer here. Okay, and then you have again another sleeve, okay, through which this is connected. So you can have multiple, these things connected over each other, and I'm looking at the top view. Okay, so I'm looking at the top view here. Okay, in plan it might be something like this. Okay, not at the same level. Okay, at different levels. Okay, now let us say it is being rotated in this direction and this is being rotated in this direction. Okay, with uniform angular velocity, okay, of omega. So after time t, let us say it started at time t equal to 0, and both of them are being rotated at a uniform angular velocity omega. This angle of rotation would be omega t, right? Angle of rotation is angular velocity times the total time, and this would be again omega t, right? Now if you consider the free body diagram of this system, okay, what would you get? The free body diagram would be, okay, what kind of force? Let us say this is mass m and this is mass m here, or if you want to be more accurate, or let us say that total mass is m and each mass is m by 2. Now, as you know, if you rotate a mass around a point, it applies a centripetal force, right? Correct. So if you have a system like this, which is being rotated, okay, it will apply a centripetal force which is equal to what? What is the centripetal force? It is m omega square r. I hope you remember the centripetal force of a rotating mass and around in a circular motion, uniform circular motion. Similarly, this one, let me make it symmetric, also would apply the same force, okay, m omega square r. Okay. Now what will happen? This force component, okay, would act, the horizontal component would act opposite to each other and get cancel off. However, if you take the vertical component, if you take here the vertical component of both these forces, they would actually add up. So this system becomes, okay, something like a system which is applying a total vertical force of m omega square r, this is m by 2, sorry, okay, times, remember this is omega t here, so this is sine omega t plus again, okay, so this is the vertical force m omega square r sine omega t. So this you get as m omega square sine omega t. Okay, and horizontal force is basically 0. No horizontal force is being applied here. Okay, which is fine. I mean, in this case, had it been only one mass rotating, you would have horizontal excitation as well. Okay, now let us say I have this. Now what does this remind you of? Let us say if I equate this as P naught and this as the sine function, is it not the same form that we have been discussing till now? So P sine omega t. This is a harmonic excitation, okay, due to uniform frequency, uniform circular motion of these two masses at rotational velocity equal to omega. Okay, the only difference here is now your P naught here is not constant, your amplitude is not constant here. Okay, P naught is a function of omega. Okay, so as you increase the angular velocity, your amplitude of the force would increase. Okay, so that thing you have to keep in mind. Now, if you have the PT here, I know that my U of t is what? It is U naught, or let me write down the maximum dynamic displacement. U naught, the maximum dynamic displacement is what? It is RED times UST, right? Which is RED times P naught by K. So P naught by K, let me write it as m omega square r. I'll write it as K, and then this is RED. Okay. Now K by m in the denominator, I can bring the K by m here. Okay. So this is K by m here. I can write this as omega by omega square by omega n square. So this would be r. Okay. And this would be omega by omega n square times r d. Okay. So in this is the dynamic excitation. Is this clear to all of you? Anyone has any confusion up to this point? Clear? All right. So how do we apply basically this excitation? We take this unbalanced load, the rotating system, we attach to any structure, or let us say a dam. Okay. Okay. If I have a dam like this, I attach this to, and then I keep increasing the high frequency of this motor so that I can apply the harmonic force. Okay. This way I can take this system to anywhere. And this rotation, how does it apply? This is like any simple motor that you see. Okay. Any simple motor that you see can be used to apply the load here. Okay. All right. One correction here. This is actually, let me write it. Remember, this is K here. I am taking this excitation. This mass m, small m, is of the rotating mass. Okay. What I want, m is the mass of the structure. So what I am saying, the equation mu double dot plus cu plus ku, and this equal to m omega square r sine omega t. So this easily you can get confused. This small m, capital M. This small m is for the rotating mass which is being attached to the structure, but the equation of motion is for the structure here. So I need to make that correction here. What I will write here actually, P naught is m omega square r divided by k. Okay, I'm going to multiply with m and divide it by m. Okay, and this is RD. Why I'm doing that? Because my omega n is actually k by capital M, mass of the structure, not the small m. Okay, so that I can write here as this R, okay, m by m. All right, this m I will bring it down and I can write it as now this quantity. So forget about this. So the final expression for the dynamic maximum displacement would be R m by m omega by omega n square times RD. So I can still represent in terms of the frequency ratio. Okay. Now I will have this additional term here, which is now constant. It does not depend on the applied frequency. Okay. And this is similar to the acceleration modification factor, and I can do same thing for the acceleration as well. Remember, the acceleration was nothing but, okay, what was the maximum acceleration? If you remember it correctly, this divided by p naught by m. Okay, this was sine minus sine omega t minus phi. Okay, so the maximum acceleration that you had is actually minus, or let us forget the minus sign because it's the absolute acceleration anyway, this times RA. So you can again apply the same formula. Okay, substitute the value of RA, or let us say I want to write it in terms of RA, I can again write it as M, and this term I would have as R omega n square divided by capital M times RA. Okay, if you substitute the value of again P naught, okay, and sorry, this should be, again I made a mistake, should be M here, the capital M for the structure. Okay, so what I want you to do, go through this very carefully. Okay, not very difficult to derive here. Okay, I want you to derive it again once by yourself so that you don't get confused by M, between M and M, and you should be able to derive the expression for maximum displacement and amplitude. All right. Okay, we are going to conclude our class here. All right.